This last week has been one of the busiest weeks that I can remember.
Hey girl,
We
how
are
are
still
ya?
on the house hunt and it's not going great. We are officially in the throes of summer and it has gotten extremely hot. Scarlet has spending most of the days inside the barn to try and beat the heat.
Frisco Bill?
And the last couple of days I've been running errands like crazy because I am getting ready to go on a little bit of a vacation pretty soon. Since temperatures have reached almost 100 degrees today, I haven't done anything with the horses except the bare minimum.
It's okay.
Even inside underneath the fan, Scarlet has still sweat quite a bit today, so this evening I am going to be giving them a bunch of baths. I also got some special tests in the mail for a few of the horses. But before I get anything going, I'm going to try and cool this barn down a little bit more. I really love this little barn, but whoever built it didn't leave any space for ventilation, so it gets really hot in here. The tests that I got in the mail are going to be for Ziggy and the little Gus.
Sig.
It is really hot and they do need to stay refrigerated, so I'm just going to give you guys a quick peek of them. These tests are pretty handy. Usually you get them from the vet or the vet will just run them for you. These are simple enough to run, so I feel comfortable doing them myself. These tests do give you an idea if maybe your horse is having some issues with their hind gut. Even though Ziggy isn't showing any signs of ulcers, they do come in a set of 2, so I'm just going to go ahead and run one on him today. He has been getting the last couple of days off because we did have that big ride. I did notice he was a little bit sore afterwards, so he's just been getting some time off and I've been lunging him to help continue building his top line. It's very interesting, really just one side of his back was tight, and I think that just goes to show how important it is that your horse is balanced. Ziggy still does have trouble bending to the left, which is the side that he was sore on. The tests that I bought do require a fresh pile of poop from each horse. I do really want to make sure that it is super fresh so I get the best possible results. So I'm going to go ahead and lock Ziggy in his dry lot and wait for him to make a new pile for me. Basically, these tests will be able to tell if there is any kind of blood in the poop. Every time I've used these tests in the past, I have had a really good indicator that the horse may have hindgut ulcers, which Ziggy does not have. This test is not appropriate if you think your horse has gastric ulcers, so just keep that in mind. While I wait for Ziggy to make me a fresh pile, I am going to go ahead and catch little Gus up. Even in this heat, Nigel has been super sassy. He does not want to come inside. Because he loves his little cabana so much, I am going to do an upgrade of it pretty soon just so he has much more space in the shade. It looks like all of the boys are smushed into their little run.
Gus.
I have been letting these guys out on pasture 24/7,
Boys.
so they are looking really shiny these days. The weather has been extremely hot and it is tricky to fit all of these horses into a training schedule every day. It really is hovering on the edge of being too hot for them, but mostly it's too hot for me. Nobody likes to be up on a horse and then get dizzy and plop off the side, so these guys have been getting a lot of time just practicing regular skills like getting caught and doing some basic grooming things. I do think little Gus will let me catch him if I walk out into the pasture, so I'm just going to fill up their water and turn out the other boys and then come back and catch him. It went very quickly from spring to summer, and I've noticed there's a little bit of haze on the horizon. Unfortunately, where I'm located, we do get a lot of smoke from wildfires. Lightning strikes and also sparks flying off the highway are a big reason that there's so many wildfires around here. When these super hot, dry days mix with a gusty wind, it makes the perfect combination to really get some grass burning. Luckily for these boys, it isn't too crisp yet, but we are definitely heading in that direction.
Come on, Gus. Be a good boy, Gussie. There's a good boy.
I could tell Gus was calculating in his mind if he really wanted me to catch him or if he wanted to run around the pasture for a little bit more, but as you can see, he has been sweating a little bit today. Since I will have him caught up, I'm going to give him a bath too, and hopefully that'll make him feel a little bit more comfortable. As soon as I start leading Gus inside, the other horses think that they are going to be missing out on something fun, so they follow me into their dry lot. When it gets really hot and dry like this, I do get a little bit discouraged because I'm finally getting in the swing of riding all these horses and the weather just makes it a little bit miserable. Here is a good view of some of the grass that has already really dried up. Typically when people think about living in Montana, they think of the super cold winters, but it does get extremely hot here in the summer, which makes for a really tricky combination for keeping horses. This extreme heat does give me the opportunity to catch up on a few things that I've been putting off. A few of the horses do need their feet trimmed, so hopefully I can tackle a few of those today. It looks like Ziggy hasn't made any new poop for me. Since he's been over at the barn, Ziggy really has been gaining a lot of good muscle mass. He isn't ever going to look as good as Little Gus just because of the breed of horse he is, but he should be able to fill out quite a bit more. It really bummed me out to see this little guy hitch a ride in on Gus. When it does get really hot and dry and you add in a bunch of grasshoppers that tend to eat the hay, it can make for an extremely difficult hay year. Thankfully, the price of hay I've seen at around $150 to $200 a ton for the new hay being cut this year. Typically, I don't have to pay more than $200 a ton for my giant stack of hay that I get. Recently, while I was out house hunting, I did happen to snatch a really reasonably priced flatbed trailer, so I did pick up some more expensive small bales of hay. Because I am going to be going on a little bit of a trip soon, it just makes it so much easier for whoever is watching my horses to feed. I was hoping the sound of this shaky plate might get little Gus's guts moving. He hasn't shown any signs of ulcers this year, but I thought it would be fun just to go ahead and test him. Little Gus is one of the horses that I have seen have a positive test result for this, so it'll be fun to see if he is still free and clear. Since I haven't gotten any fresh piles, I do need to refrigerate the tests so they don't go bad. As I'm brushing Little Gus, I do notice that his hind feet are in some need of attention. Scarlet's birthday was the beginning of this month. She did turn 2 whole years old. I always forget how long I've had her. The time has kind of flown by, honestly. She was only 3 months old when I picked her up at the auction, and I'm now coming into one of the most exciting times in her training. I've done a lot of just basic handling with her, hopefully getting her into a more docile state. Scarlet was a completely wild horse off of a reservation when I bought her, so it's been a little bit tricky getting her calmed down this far. I have worked with a lot of Mustangs and she is very similar, except I think she was handled a lot more roughly when she was very first captured. She did come to me with some significant injuries and illness that it did take quite a while to get resolved. Her body does carry a few pretty significant scars that she got before I bought her. Even though she did have a particularly rough start to her life, I think now she is in a pretty good place. It has been really nice to have her inside the barn every day. She gets to watch me work on these horses, doing their feet and grooming them. This daily observation of regular domestic horse life, I think, is pretty beneficial to these wild ones. Before they're captured, they don't get the opportunity to see humans handling horses in a very productive way. So I do think that this will make a difference in her general demeanor over time. Little Gus is very good now about his feet. He wasn't that way when I first got him. But as far as a pretty good example for Scarlet to learn from, he is about the best now. I did do his front feet about 3 weeks ago, and there doesn't look to be much growth on them. Because it has been so dry and hot, these horses' feet are changing a bit from how they look during the winter when there's snow on the ground and quite a bit of moisture. Since I still have no samples to test, I am going to go ahead and give Little Gus a bath. From this angle, you can really see the haze on the horizon from the little bit of smoke that we have. Unfortunately, most summers now do have a few weeks where the smoke is so intense that it's really not practical to ride these horses outside. As we continue our hunt for property, that is one of the main things that we are taking into consideration. We do love Montana, but it is getting increasingly hard to justify staying out here when the winters are really harsh and the summers are as well. With the crazy increase in the cost of properties out here, it is making more and more sense to move to another state. The setup we have right now is pretty nice for all of the horses, and buying a comparable property would be somewhere between $1.5 and $2.5 million. So that is just something that is not in the cards for us right now. With Little Gus all spick and span, I'm gonna go ahead and grab Scarlet and give her a wash as well. I've recently started expecting more from this little girl, but every once in a while she does have a scare about something. I am used to working with horses like Scarlet that react in a very explosive way over very little things. You can see here when I slow it down that it was just the rope coming over the top of her nose that got her really in kind of a frantic state. When this happens, I just basically ignore it and I support the horse when they need it. There is really no benefit to reprimanding a horse when it gets scared from something simple like this. It has been my experience that over time, if you just ignore those little things, then the horse realizes that it's really not a big deal. Compared to when I got her, Scarlet has matured quite a bit, but she still reacts the way a wild horse would under certain circumstances. The basis of my whole training program is to give these horses the confidence they need so they can navigate their way through the world without so much input from a human. I think this method overall creates a very sensible horse that is brave and can handle new situations without being told what to do or how to think. I really value an independently minded horse. I think they're more fun to ride and handle. Although I do really like some things about natural horsemanship, I feel like most people focus on the desensitizing portion far too much. Even a horse like Scarlet, I don't desensitize very much. I want them to be sensitive, but I also want them to be brave on their own. I think one thing that people get confused quite often is the difference between a broke horse and a quiet horse, or in some cases, a very dull horse. For me, when someone over desensitizes a horse, they kind of leave a little robot or a shell of the animal that was there before, and these horses' personalities are what is most important to me. If you've been watching my channel for any length of time, you know that all of them are very different. A lot of times desensitizing a horse can make them more safe for a beginner rider, but I would prefer my horses have a little bit of extra pizzazz. My goal with these guys isn't to train them for the lowest level of rider that is possible. It's to train them to the best of the horse's ability. I really prefer them to be able to react on their own without worrying about if they're going to get in trouble for it. Scarlet is probably one of the most reactive horses that I have had, but you can see that she has really discovered how to navigate the world in her own way. She has been getting tied up every couple of days, and this is her first day that she's standing next to little Gus. Gus does stand tied very well. He will just go ahead and settle down and take a little snooze. Since I am still waiting for some samples from the horses, I am going to catch up the rest of the boys and fix their feet and give them baths as well. Before I try and catch any of these boys, since they are in the dry lot, I am going to shut the gate so they don't escape again. One thing I've noticed this summer is that Stewie and Pete are becoming better friends. Big Gus does sometimes have some sensitivity on the grass, so I do keep a very close eye on him this time of year. When I get back into the barn, I see that Ziggy has produced a fresh pile for me, so without delay, I am going to go get a sample.
It's your poop.
Even if you've never seen one of these before, the directions are extremely simple. The little container gets filled up with a sample and then water. After a little shake, you just get a few drops of the mixture and put it into the test. This doesn't take very long to run. You do need to read it within the first 15 minutes that you put the sample in. As the poop water works its way up the test, once it hits the control bar, you can read the test results. I do really like using the tie blocker rings, but Scarlet has figured out how to pull the lead rope through when she wants a snack. Since she started her little journey tying, she hasn't had any real crazy events, so I am going to start hard tying her today. I know there are a lot of people these days that do not hard tie their horses ever. I do still think that it is an important skill to learn, even if they never use it. With Scarlet all tied up, I go back inside and it looks like Ziggy's test is negative. I have been getting a lot of questions about ulcers, and what's important to remember is a horse can get gastric ulcers in as little as 5 days. So especially with horses you get from an auction, once they travel to the sale and are put through the auction and then you bring them home, that is enough time to develop ulcers. So even if your horse is brought to the auction ulcer free, just the stress of that event can trigger an episode that leads to the development of gastric ulcers pretty quickly. Stewie and I zip over to check on Scarlet, and it looks like she does remember Stewie from their time together last spring. I have been working Stewie here and there, getting ready to ride him again, but today it looks like I do need to give his feet a little trim. Stewie was out of a Mustang mare, and he definitely inherited her hooves. Out of all of the horses I have, Stewie has the toughest feet. They also grow extremely fast, so I do have to trim them quite often. This is somewhere between 5 and 6 weeks of growth for Stewie. I really try to keep my horses on a schedule between 4 and 6 weeks. It doesn't take me very long to work on their feet if I just bring them in and groom them and give them a quick touch up. Today it took me about 15 to 20 minutes to trim Stewie's feet, and it would have been faster, but I was extremely hot. Stewie is a very good boy to have his feet trimmed, and while he's in here today, I am going to measure him.
Hold on, Stewie.
Stewie's mother was from Salt Wells Creek, and I have worked a few other Mustangs from that HMA, and they were a little bit slower to develop. I keep crossing my fingers that Stewie is going to have another growth spurt, but for the last couple of times I've measured him, they've all come up to about 14 hands. I have been working with Stewie on just some refreshers on everything he knows. I've been taking him on tiny little bareback rides around here and there, working on steering and stopping. Since I do own all of these horses, I don't have to worry about a training timeline, which is beneficial in a lot of cases, but sometimes it doesn't give me a whole lot of motivation to move through their training very quickly. While I was in the barn, it looks like Gus made a fresh sample for me, so I'm gonna zip through Stewie's bath rather quickly. It looks like Scarlet is doing a pretty good job of staying tied. I did have a few comments on a short that I made while the horses were standing out in the sun after baths. There were a few people who were convinced that this was complete torture for the horses. While it was almost 100 degrees earlier, it is really starting to cool down now. In my opinion, standing tied is one of the most important tasks for a young horse to learn, so they need to be able to do it well before they leave my care. Standing tied for an hour or two is not going to kill these horses. It is a very practical skill that they do need to learn. Little Gus's test does come back negative, so it looks like both of the boys were free and clear of any suspicion of hindgut ulcers. The sun is starting to go down, but I should have time to catch up Pete and Big Gus and give those two baths as well. This time of year, Pete is really coming around to being handled every day, and he is much easier to catch. If it does get much hotter out, there will be some intense heat stress on the grass, and I will have to pull Big Gus off of the pasture. I try really hard to leave him out with the rest of the boys, but sometimes I just need to pull him off so he doesn't get sore. Gus is broke enough that he definitely could move on to a new home, but I am really hesitant to do so because he is a little bit harder to manage. If I were to send him to a new home and they turned him out on grass with complete disregard to his needs, then he would be lame in a very short amount of time. One thing a lot of people don't realize is how seasonal the horse industry is in Montana. It is not unheard of for people to just buy a horse in the spring, ride them all summer, and then sell them again when the weather starts to get bad. That is not really my jam. I like to keep these horses year round. But for most people, it is common practice to get a new horse every single year. There is also a giant part of the industry that is made up of just lease horses in Montana. Many dude ranches and outfits that offer rides in the summertime will lease a large herd of horses that are returned somewhere down south for the winter. For me to do the best job possible, it is important for me to understand how the industry functions. My goal is always to get these horses in long-term permanent homes that have the resources and knowledge to keep them.
Pete. Goodbye, Pete. Yes. Goodbye, Pete.
Most of the horses that I have here long-term do have significant training issues like Pete. They may have a level of maintenance that is hard for the normal horse owner to maintain, like Big Gus.
Hey, you're a good boy.
And for a horse like Ziggy or Prim, I may take an extra long time to find just the right home for them. One of the really nice things that I just realized from starting a YouTube channel is I now have the opportunity to keep some of the horses a little bit longer. Typically, a horse like Primrose I would buy and then rehab, and the price that I sell her for would cover all of her costs. Since I am getting some income from YouTube now, I don't have to sell Prim to cover her bills. I have thought about keeping her recently, but I do think she would really love to have her own person that can spend a lot more dedicated time to her. She has no health or training issues, so it would be kind of selfish of me to keep her. Once she's broke, it would give me a lot more time to spend with horses like Pete that do require a lot more time to get the same things accomplished.
Gus.
Recently, I've been doing a lot of reflecting on how much my operation is going to change now that I don't necessarily have to have a real job. I have put my eBay store on vacation mode, so I'm still selling things, but I don't have to go into town to the post office every single day, which has freed up a lot of my time. With all of the other horses caught up, Gus begrudgingly allows me to put a halter on him. Gus is one that I will be putting some glue-on shoes on in the very near future. When I was doing this video, his feet looked pretty square, but looking back on them now, I am probably going to go back and tweak them a little bit.
Gussie.
This is one of the nice things about me doing my own farrier care. If I don't get it quite right, I can go back the next day or the day after that and make tiny adjustments until they're just right. Most of the time I feel pretty confident about how I take care of the horse's feet, but every once in a while I'll look at them and think that I have done just a horrible job. Even though I have been trimming these horses for quite a long time, I do like to do continuing education as often as possible. Another perk that I realized the other day is I can host clinics a lot more often now if I would like to. I have a pretty long list of clinicians that I would love to see come out to Montana, so hopefully over the winter I can get some of those set up for next summer. Even though there are tons of horses in Montana, some of the opportunities for continuing education and to see some of the bigger clinicians are just not up here.
Stewie! You little turd. Stewie!
Luckily, I caught Stewie before he traumatized Pete too much. I was really trying to be nice to him and not work him when it was really hot out, but if he continues his shenanigans, I am gonna have no choice but to knock him down a few notches with some exercise every day. As you can see, he is getting a little bit on the pudgy side. When Stewie is out on pasture, he is very focused on eating as much grass as he can when he's not napping. While I am eventually going to send Ziggy on to a new home, while he's here gaining his muscle back, I think he'll be the perfect companion to accompany Stewie out on some trails. Stewie is generally a very calm horse, so it won't take very many rides before he's ready to go off on some adventures. I am really proud how good Scarlet has been today. With her first day being hardtied, there was no commotion and no struggles. In my opinion, she is right on track for where I want her to be this summer. For the last couple of days, I've been getting the horses on a different bit of a feeding routine. I bought some plain grass hay for the horses to eat while I'm away, just so they're occupied and don't get into trouble. This should take them a lot longer to eat than the alfalfa that they're currently on. I try really hard not to stress out when I go away, but this is a lot of horses to take care of, and if I don't get the right horse sitter, then I will worry the entire time that I'm away. I like to set everything up so it's really easy just to feed all of the horses and there's no question as to who gets what. I do have a lot of hay nets, so I can essentially put every single meal for each horse in a net while I'm away. Whiplash and Goose did get baths yesterday and their feet touched up, so they're just gonna hang out for the rest of the evening. I'm a little bit surprised these boys haven't finished eating all of the grass in their tiny pasture. The bigger pasture that is attached to their dry lot is starting to dry up a bit, so if I don't get them out on it soon, that's just gonna be a waste of food. I have been making a plan in case Big Gus does need to come inside the barn. I will switch up the horses quite a bit where they're turned out. Ziggy really has been enjoying being out on his own little grass pasture, and it would be great if I could get him a spot out on the big pasture. I'm thinking that Ziggy and Frisco Bill might be a really good pair to put out on the smaller pasture 24/7. Initially, when I got Ziggy, there was a question as to whether or not he would be able to tolerate grass all the time, but he seems to be doing fine and there's no indications that he's going to have any trouble with it. Frisco Bill really likes being out on pasture, and I need to find him a friend that takes his mind off of Prim. Ziggy has made really good friends with Studman, but Studman cannot be out on the pasture, so he does need to stay in a dry lot. After observing Ziggy around a few different horses, it seems like he is just a chill guy that would really get along with whoever I put him with. In addition to picking up some grass hay, I have got some really nice straight alfalfa bales. This hay is dairy quality, so it is very high in protein and it has a ton of leaves. I'm going to be testing it out on Nigel and Frisco Bill to see if they can maybe eat this hay instead of pellets. As you can see, it is a lot more leafy than the big giant bales that I have, and this will be really easy for Nigel to shake out and get the leaves.
Nigel! Nigel!
I have been giving it to him for a few days now, and he's not wasting very much of it, just the really thick stems. Part of the reason I think Scarlet is being so well behaved is because she has been switched over to grass hay. The alfalfa that I get can be too rich for these young growing horses. The amount of calcium and other minerals that it has can present some challenges in the development of their bones. I've kept a very close eye on Scarlet's rate of growth because I don't want her to have any orthopedic problems. She has gotten grass hay on and off since I've had her when she's experienced growth spurts.
Tiny!
With it cooling down, it looks like Tiny has finally come out to go on a little bit of an evening hunt. Since Scarlet had been inside all day and then stood tied up for quite a while, she did have a little bit more energy coming back into the round pen this evening.
We are gonna do that again, girl.
This is a pretty common thing for a young wild horse to do. They kind of squirt through little doorways like this. This is something for me that needs to be addressed right away, so I'll just take her in and out of this door until she can walk calmly. Again, there's really no reason to reprimand her for this. I'm just going to do it until she does it correctly, and then she'll be done for the evening. I have been switching out Scarlet's halter once or twice a day to get her used to being haltered and rehaltered, and she is making some progress, but she is still getting her halter on when she's turned out in the round pen. It has been really neat to reflect on when I first got Scarlet. I didn't have much expectations for how she would look as she grew up and what I was possibly going to do with her. She was honestly an impulse buy because I felt bad for her at the horse sale. I could have never imagined the opportunities that this little horse has brought me. She is the reason that I started my YouTube channel. I just thought it would be fun to track her progress over time. I do think that I am pretty good at picking out nice horses, but I did not look at Scarlet before the sale, and I barely looked at her in the sale ring. For a horse that was only $25, she is turning into a pretty stand-up citizen that is not too hard on the eyes either. I'm really hoping that once the weather lets up a tiny bit more, I can kind of do a side-by-side between her and Studman. Studman has been saddled one time since he's been here. I don't think he'd ever been saddled before that, so I need to go back and do some kind of retraining with him. I do think Scarlet is going to be a little bit more reactive than most horses for the saddling process, so it would be interesting to do a side-by-side for that reason. Just over the last couple of days, Scarlet has really calmed down. I think it's just because I'm handling her more and she's getting to see a lot more of the other horses being handled as well. Gus is a little bit grouchy. He hasn't gotten his dinner yet, but I get these horses turned out in short order and they go right past their new hay and onto the pasture. I am going to do a whole entire series on the trip that I have planned coming up. While it is a little bit of a vacation for me, I am going to be going to see some horses while I'm away, so it should be super fun for you guys to tag along. I am going to keep it a little bit of a secret where I'm going, but if you guys aren't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss my next adventure. Thank you so much for watching and stay tuned for the next video.